I still remember the afternoon when my daughter-in-law stood in front of me, her eyes cold, her voice steady, and told me, "You should think about finding another place to live." For a moment I thought I misheard her. I even smiled. Not because it was funny, but because my heart needed a second to understand what was happening. I had lived in that house with my son and her for almost 2 years. I had cooked in that kitchen. I had folded their clothes. I had held their newborn baby with the kind of love that only a grandmother understands. And somehow, in that quiet living room, with the curtains moving gently from the breeze, she was now asking me to leave. I looked at her face. There was no anger in her eyes, no shouting, no shaking of hands. Only firmness. Only distance. As if she had spent many nights thinking about this moment, practicing the words until they didn't tremble anymore. My son wasn't home. He didn't know she was telling me this. Or maybe he did. That was the thought that hurt me more than anything. I stood there for a long time before answering. Not because I was trying to fight back. Not because I wanted to argue. But because I could feel something inside me changing. Something soft tearing quietly. The way old paper tears when you fold it too many times. I wanted to cry. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to run to my son and say, "Please tell me this isn't true." But I didn't. When I finally spoke, my voice was gentle. "All right," I said. "I understand." And I did understand, though not in the way she imagined. I understood that this wasn't sudden. It wasn't random. It wasn't something a person says without a long road leading to it. This was only the final chapter of a story that I didn't even know I was living. The betrayal didn't begin that day. It began long before that. With small things, soft things, things so tiny you would never think they could break a family. But they did. And this was just the moment when all the pieces finally fell into place. I want to tell you the whole story. Not because I'm angry. Not because I want sympathy. But because I believe many mothers-in-law, many women who came from simpler times, will understand the quiet pain inside these words. My name is Maria. I am 65 years old. I lived a peaceful life in a small town for most of my days. I had one son, Daniel, the child my heart still beats for, even now. His father passed away when Daniel was just 13. And from that day onward, it was always the two of us against the world. Daniel grew up gentle, thoughtful, soft-spoken. He was the kind of boy who remembered to bring me flowers on my birthday, even when he was a teenager. He was the kind of child who checked on me when I coughed at night. He was the kind of young man who hugged me every time he left for school. I used to tell him, "One day, you'll make a wonderful husband." And he did. He met his wife, Alina, at university. She was beautiful in a modern way. Smart, confident, always speaking her mind. When he first brought her home, I liked her. Truly. She seemed respectful, friendly, and warm. She asked me questions about the past. She told me she wanted to learn my recipes. She even hugged me the first time we met. I thought we would grow close. In fact, I prayed for it. For a widowed mother, a daughter-in-law is not just a new family member. She is hope. She is the dream of having a daughter you never had. She is the bridge that connects generations. But sometimes bridges don't hold. Sometimes you walk across them with trust and they collapse beneath your feet. Not suddenly, but slowly, quietly, piece by piece. Life before the storm. Before everything changed, my days were simple. I lived in my small house, tending the garden, visiting the local market, cooking meals that reminded me of my own mother. Life was peaceful but quiet, too quiet sometimes. I was growing older, and the walls of my home felt too still. Daniel used to visit every weekend with Alina. We would sit at the table, drink tea, and talk. Sometimes we laughed for hours. Other times I simply listened to them talk about their new life together. I never said this to them, but after they left, the silence of the house felt heavier. When Daniel told me they were expecting a baby, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I felt something opening inside me, something warm, something bright. "I want you close to us, Mom," Daniel told me one evening. "When the baby arrives, we'll need you." Those words wrapped around my heart like a soft blanket. He needed me. My son still needed me. A few months later, they asked me to move in with them for a while, just until the baby gets older. I hesitated. I didn't want to intrude. But Daniel insisted, and Alina said the sweetest thing. We want our child to grow up with a grandmother. How could I say no? And so I packed my bags, holding more hope than belongings. The new home. Their home was modern, bright, full of things I didn't fully understand. Machines that beeped, screens on the walls, lights that turned on when you walked past. It was nothing like the home I had lived in for decades. With wooden floors that creaked and curtains I stitched myself. Alina showed me to my room. It's not big, she said. But to me it felt like a treasure. A place where I belonged. In the first days, everything felt warm. We cooked together. We prepared the baby's room. We talked about names, childhood memories, dreams. I felt like I had finally become part of a big family again. I didn't know then that small cracks were already forming. Tiny misunderstandings. Soft tensions. Things I brushed away because I wanted harmony more than anything. Things like Alina correcting the way I folded laundry. Her asking me not to use certain spices when cooking. Her gently moving things I placed around the house. Her sighs when I asked questions about how I could help. Little things. Small things. But sometimes small things grow. I ignored them. Because the baby was coming. Because love was more important to me than anything else. Because I believed we would become close in time. Believed wrong. When the baby arrived. The day the baby was born, I felt like my world had become brighter. I held that tiny child in my arms, and my heart felt full for the first time in many years. Daniel looked tired but happy. Alina looked exhausted but glowing. For a few weeks life was beautiful. Cooked, I cleaned, I helped with the baby. I sang lullabies I remembered from my own childhood. I kissed the baby's forehead every morning. But slowly, something changed. Alina began to distance herself from me. She stopped letting me carry the baby for long. She corrected almost everything I did. She whispered with Daniel more often. She watched me with a look I couldn't understand. I told myself it was stress. I told myself she was tired. I told myself all new mothers feel overwhelmed. But deep in my heart something began to hurt. Something began to fear. Something began to whisper. You don't belong here as much as you think. And eventually, that whisper became true. The first signs of change were so small that I almost missed them. They were hidden inside quiet moments, small pauses, tiny looks. But when you live under the same roof with someone, you can feel when the air shifts. You can sense when the warmth you once felt starts to cool. Alina stopped smiling at me in the mornings. It wasn't something obvious. She didn't frown. She didn't glare. She simply stopped offering the small warmth that people give each other without thinking. I would greet her softly, "Good morning," and she would nod instead of replying. Sometimes she would walk past me as if I wasn't there at all. I told myself, maybe she is just tired. The baby did cry a lot. Sleep was rare in the house. New motherhood can be overwhelming. I understood that more than anyone. But then the distance grew a little more each day. When I cooked breakfast, she would say, "Oh, you made that again?" When I cleaned the living room, she would whisper to Daniel. She moved everything around. When I folded the baby's clothes, she would quietly redo them after I left. She never raised her voice. She never argued. But she slowly erased every small thing I did, one after another. Daniel's silence. My son, my sweet Daniel, saw all these moments. But he stayed silent. He was gentle. Too gentle sometimes. He believed that peace was created by avoiding conflict, not by facing it. One evening when I was washing dishes, he stood beside me and said, "Mom, maybe don't worry so much. Alina is trying her best." I turned off the water and looked at him. "I know," I said softly. "I am trying my best too." He nodded, but he didn't meet my eyes. And that was the moment, the first moment when I felt he was slipping away from me. Not because he wanted to. Not because he didn't love me. but because love changes when another person becomes the center of your world. And I understood that. But understanding doesn't stop the pain. The baby's room incident. One afternoon the baby was crying non-stop. Alina had gone to the store, and Daniel was napping because he had stayed up the whole night helping her. I picked up the baby gently and walked around the room, humming a lullaby. The baby quieted down after a few minutes, resting her small head against my shoulder. I felt peaceful for the first time that week. Alina walked in just then. Her face changed the moment she saw me holding the baby. Her eyes narrowed slightly, so slightly that you might think I imagined it. "What are you doing?" she asked. I was just comforting her," I said quietly. "She was crying. You should have left her. She needs to learn how to self-soothe." Froze. I had never heard that term before. But the tone, the coldness, the judgment, I understood all of it. "I didn't mean to do anything wrong," I whispered. She took the baby from my arms as if I had done something dangerous. Daniel woke up and rushed over, asking what happened. "Your mother is interfering again," Alina said. Interfering. That word cut deeper than she would ever know. Daniel didn't look at me. He simply placed a hand on his wife's shoulder and said, "Let's just rest for now." And I stood there alone, feeling like a stranger in a house where I washed dishes, folded clothes, and sang lullabies. Quiet conversations behind closed doors. In the weeks that followed, I often heard whispers coming from their bedroom. Quiet but sharp. Words spoken in hushed voices. Sometimes one of them would sigh loudly afterward. Sometimes the room would fall silent for an hour. Whenever I walked by, the whispers stopped abruptly. Like a door closing on a conversation meant to exclude me. I told myself not to take it personally. Every couple has private conversations. They are husband and wife. Of course they talk about things that do not include me. But the feeling in my heart told me something else. It told me that my name was being spoken in those whispers. It told me that I was slowly becoming a problem they needed to solve. One night when I passed by their door, I heard Alina say in a frustrated voice, "She needs boundaries, Daniel. She's everywhere. She's in everything. This is our house, not hers." I stopped walking. Her words pinned me to the floor like cold needles. Daniel said something I couldn't hear. Then Alina responded, "You're too soft with her. You always have been. But now we have a child. We need our space." I walked away quietly, holding the wall for support. My legs felt weak. My heart felt heavier than ever. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to be everywhere. I simply wanted to help. I simply wanted to be a mother. A grandmother. But it seemed that every step I took felt like the wrong one to her. Redefining my place. So I tried to step back. I stopped cooking unless asked. I stopped cleaning common areas. I stayed in my room more often. I spoke only when spoken to. I tiptoed around the house, careful not to disturb anyone. I thought this would help. I thought maybe Alina would appreciate the space and feel more comfortable. But instead, the distance only grew colder. When I didn't join them for dinner, she said to Daniel, "See, she doesn't even want to be part of the family." When I stayed in my room, she told him, "She's upset with us. I can feel it." When I cooked just for myself, she quietly commented, "She's acting like a guest now." I felt trapped. No matter what I did, it felt wrong. No matter how much I stepped back, it wasn't enough. And Daniel, my sweet son, he was caught in between. He would look at me sometimes with sadness in his eyes, as if he wanted to say something. But he never did. He kept peace for his wife's sake. And I understood that. But each silence from him chipped a little piece off my heart. The family dinner. One Sunday evening, Daniel suggested we have dinner together like old times. I could tell he wanted to bring back some warmth. I appreciated that more than he knew. I cooked a simple meal, rice, vegetables, and a chicken dish Daniel used to love as a child. Alina sat at the table, but she didn't eat much. She pushed food around her plate, sighed softly, and avoided conversation. Halfway through dinner, she finally spoke. Daniel, did you tell your mother about the new rules? I looked up confused. My son froze. Alina, he whispered. No, she pressed. She needs to know. My heart began to beat faster. I felt like a student being scolded in front of the class. What rules? I asked softly. Alina folded her hands and said calmly, as if reading from a prepared list. From now on, we want to raise our child independently. So please, don't pick up the baby without asking. Don't cook unless we request it. Don't rearrange anything in the house. Don't interfere with our parenting decisions. Her tone was polite. Her words were sharp. Each sentence felt like a gentle push away from their life. I nodded slowly. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. Daniel looked at me, guilt in his eyes, but not enough courage to defend me. Okay, I whispered. It was all I could say. Dinner ended early. The house felt suffocatingly quiet. And that night in my small room, I cried into my pillow for the first time since moving in. Not because of the rules. Not because of the restrictions. But because I finally realized something. They wanted a family. But they didn't want me in it. The baby's first laugh. Few days later, something beautiful happened. I was sitting on the couch when the baby looked at me and laughed for the very first time. A real sweet laugh. The kind that makes your heart bloom inside your chest. I laughed softly too. I reached out my finger for her to hold. At that exact moment, Alina walked in. She froze. Her eyes locked on my hand, touching the baby's. What did I say about boundaries? She whispered quietly, but firmly. Pulled back immediately. I'm sorry, I said softly. Daniel rushed over from the kitchen. What happened? She's overstepping again, Alina said. I shook my head. No, she just laughed. I didn't. You don't understand, Alina cut in. You confuse her routines. You make things harder for us. Daniel didn't defend me. He didn't say anything. He simply picked up the baby and handed her to Alina. And in that moment I felt something break inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a small thread snapping. One that held my heart together. The beginning of the end. After that day, the tension became almost unbearable. Alina rarely spoke to me. Daniel was always tired, always stressed, always avoiding confrontation. The baby grew older and recognized Alina's voice more than mine. I began to feel like a shadow in the house. One night, when I came out of my room, I overheard Alina saying softly, "She needs to leave, Daniel. This cannot continue." I stood still, frozen. My heart felt heavy but not surprised. Daniel said nothing for a long time. When he finally spoke, he whispered, "We'll talk about it tomorrow." And I knew tomorrow would be the day everything changed. The morning everything shifted. The next morning began like any other. Quiet house. Soft light coming through the curtains. The smell of warm milk in the kitchen. The sound of the baby babbling in her crib. But inside me something felt different. I knew something was coming. Something heavy, something final. When you live long enough, you can sense when a day is not like the others. There is a silence that feels too still. Pause that feels too long. A breath that feels too heavy. And that morning, the silence felt like a door slowly closing. I woke up early and made myself tea. I moved quietly so I wouldn't disturb anyone. The house had become a place where my footsteps felt too loud, even when I tried to be silent. As I was sipping the tea, I heard soft voices from the bedroom. I recognized them immediately. Daniel, Lena, talking in hushed tones. The same tone couples use when they are discussing something important, something fragile, something heavy. Part of me wanted to walk away. Part of me wanted to pretend I didn't hear anything. But my heart, my mother's heart, wanted to know if Daniel would protect me or let me go. I didn't try to listen. But the walls were thin. And their voices, though low, carried words I could not ignore. "She is too involved," Alina said. "She's making things stressful. We need our space. I'm exhausted." She doesn't understand boundaries. This is our family, Daniel, not hers. Each sentence sank deeper inside me. Daniel whispered back. His voice was softer, almost apologetic. I know you're right. We should talk to her. But she has nowhere else to go. She means well. She's my mother. There was a long silence after that. Then Alina said something I will never forget. Being your mother doesn't give her the right to live our life. And Daniel, my son, did not disagree. A tear slipped down my cheek before I even realized I was crying. I wiped it away quickly, as if someone could see me in that empty kitchen. I whispered to myself, "It's all right." But my voice shook, and for the first time since moving into their home, I felt completely alone. A soft knock on my door. Around 9 in the morning there was a knock on my door. Soft one. Gentle. Almost polite. My heart already knew who it was. I opened the door, and Alina stood there with her arms crossed lightly. She wasn't angry. She wasn't tense. She looked settled, as if she had made peace with what she was about to say. "Can we talk?" she asked. He nodded. "Of course." She stepped inside my room but didn't sit down. I stayed standing too. For a few seconds she looked around the small space. My folded clothes, my books stacked neatly on the chair, a picture of Daniel as a child beside my bed. Then she sighed. "I don't want to be harsh," she began quietly. "But we need to set things straight." My hands tightened slightly, but I kept my face calm. "You've been helpful," she continued. "But this house, this family, we need to handle things on our own." I nodded slowly. "I understand." Her eyes flickered for a moment, maybe surprised that I didn't argue. She went on, "We need space. We need privacy. And honestly, things are easier when it's just the three of us. Just the three of them. Not four." She didn't say it, but she didn't have to. Then she said the words she had prepared. The words she had probably rehearsed in the mirror. The words I had feared all along. "I think it's time you find another place to stay." There it was. Polite, gentle, but sharp enough to cut straight through me. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. For a moment the room felt blurry. The walls looked too close. The air felt too thin. But I didn't cry. Not in front of her. Instead I nodded again. "All right," I whispered. She blinked. Maybe she expected a protest. Maybe she expected me to fall apart. But she didn't know me as well as she thought. "I'll talk to Daniel," she said. It was a strange sentence because I knew, and she knew Daniel already knew. She walked out of the room quietly, closing the door behind her. And as soon as the door clicked shut, my knees gave out, and I sat on the edge of my bed. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I didn't blame anyone. I just breathed softly, trying to hold myself together. I whispered, "It's all right." Even though it wasn't. Daniel's conversation. An hour later, Daniel knocked on my door. I wiped my face quickly and opened it with a small smile. "Mom," he said. His voice was thick. His eyes were sad. He looked like a child again, scared, torn, unsure. He stepped inside and closed the door. He didn't sit down. He just stood there, looking at me with guilt weighing down his shoulders. "Mom, we've been talking," he said. I nodded softly. "And we think maybe it would be better if you stayed somewhere else for a while." For a while. A gentle lie. The kind people tell to make heartbreak sound temporary. I looked at him quietly. "You're not asking because it's what you want," I said softly. "You're asking because it's what she wants." His eyes filled with tears. "Please don't say it like that, Mom," he whispered. "How should I say it?" I asked with a sad smile. He swallowed hard. He looked at the floor. His hands trembled slightly. "It's just hard right now," he said. "Alina is overwhelmed. The baby is demanding. We're tired all the time. And she feels like you're making things harder." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Instead I whispered, "Do you feel that way too?" He closed his eyes as if the question hurt him. "It's not about what I feel," he said quietly. "It's about what keeps peace in the house." That word tasted bitter. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. "And you think I should leave to keep that peace?" I said gently. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I just want everyone to be okay." He nodded. "Understood. A mother always understands, even when the truth hurts." "When should I leave?" I asked. He took a shaky breath. Maybe this weekend." I nodded again. "All right." He looked at me, finally meeting my eyes. "Mom, I'm sorry," he whispered. I reached for his hand and held it gently. "I know," I said. "And I still love you." His tears fell then. He bent down and hugged me the way he used to when he was young. But this time the hug felt different. It felt like a goodbye covered in soft apologies. Packing my things. The next 3 days passed quietly. No arguments, no shouting, no dramatic scenes. Just silence. The kind of silence that fills a home before someone leaves it forever. I packed my clothes slowly. Folded each one carefully. Not because I needed them perfect, but because I needed something to calm my shaking hands. I wrapped the old picture frames in soft scarves. Daniel as a toddler. Daniel on his first day of school. Daniel holding his first pet fish. Memories that belonged more to me than to any house. Packed my books, my mug, my knitted blanket. Everything small enough to carry. There was no place waiting for me. No apartment reserved. No family member ready to take me in. But I packed anyway. Because when a mother is asked to leave, she leaves quietly. On the afternoon before I was supposed to go, I sat in my small room and looked around. This was the room where I had prayed quietly every night for their happiness. Where I had whispered softly to the baby when she cried. Where I had tried to make myself small, invisible, helpful. And now, it wasn't my room anymore. I touched the wall with my fingertips and whispered goodbye. The final confrontation. On the day I was supposed to leave, I walked into the living room carrying my small suitcase. Alina was sitting on the couch. She looked relieved. Not happy, just relieved. Like someone who had finally solved a problem. She stood up when she saw me. "Do you need help?" she asked politely. I shook my head. "No, thank you." We stood facing each other. Two women who should have been family, but somehow ended up on opposite sides of the same heart. "I'm sorry things became difficult," she said. Her voice was smooth. "Practice. Me. I never wanted to make trouble," I said. "I only wanted to help." "I know," she replied. "But sometimes helping too much becomes a problem." He nodded. I didn't have the strength to argue. She hesitated for a second, then added, "This is for the best." "The best for whom?" But I didn't ask. Instead I said softly, "I hope one day you understand that all I ever did came from love." She didn't respond. She didn't know how. Daniel's goodbye. Daniel drove me to a small guest house on the edge of town. A place I could stay for a few days until I found something more permanent. The car ride was silent. Only the sound of the road beneath us. When we arrived, he turned off the engine but didn't get out. He stared at the steering wheel for a long time. "Mom, I'm sorry," he whispered. I touched his shoulder gently. "I know, my son." He looked at me then, finally, fully, painfully. "Do you hate me?" he asked like a scared child. My heart almost broke at the question. "No," I said softly. "I could never hate you." He nodded slowly, tears forming again. "I just want peace," he said. And I answered with a sad smile. Peace should not come from breaking someone's heart. He closed his eyes tightly, as if the words hurt. I opened the door and stepped out slowly. Before I closed it, I leaned down and said, "Take care of your family, Daniel. And take care of your heart too." He nodded. "I'll call you," he said. But he didn't. Not for a long time. I still remember the quiet sound of the door clicking behind me. It was such a small sound. Yet it felt like the world closing. My daughter-in-law stood inside the house. her hands folded across her chest. My son was beside her, his eyes avoiding mine, as if looking at me would make everything too real. And I, his own mother, stood on the steps, holding a small bag of food I had cooked for them. When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I whispered inside myself. I smiled instead of crying. I don't know why I smiled. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was habit. Maybe mothers are trained, in some quiet part of the heart, to pretend that pain is nothing. To make everything look smaller and lighter, even while something deep inside us breaks. The evening air was cold. A little wind moved the leaves on the ground, and I felt my fingers go numb around the plastic handles of the bag. She didn't shout. She didn't push me. She didn't insult me. She simply said, in a calm voice that carried no warmth, "Please don't come over without calling. It makes things uncomfortable." But that wasn't what hurt me. What hurt was the silence afterward, the silence from my son. He didn't defend me. He didn't tell her I meant no harm. He didn't even tell me it was okay. He just stood there, his eyes lowered, as if he was a child caught between two adults. As if I wasn't the woman who raised him, fed him, stayed awake with him through fevers and school nights and heartbreaks. I looked at him and waited for even a small smile. Small gesture. Anything that said, "Mom, you're welcome here." But nothing came. So I nodded. I said, "I understand." And then I turned around and walked back down those 3 concrete steps. I didn't cry then. I didn't cry on the bus. I didn't cry when I reached my small apartment and placed the food on my own table. I cried later, when I realized this wasn't just about an unexpected visit. This was something that had been building quietly for a long time. This was the day my daughter-in-law turned my own son against me. And I hadn't even noticed it happening. My name is Amina. I am 62 years old, though my heart often feels older these days and sometimes younger when I remember the past. I grew up in a simple house, the kind where mornings smelled like tea and fried bread, and nights were filled with stories from elders who sat on the floor with pillows under their elbows. Family was everything in that world. We didn't have much, but we had each other. When I became a mother, I promised myself that my son, Ariv, would grow up with that same sense of love and belonging. He was my first and only child. There were complications during childbirth, and the doctors warned me gently that having another baby might be dangerous. So it was just me and him, a little team of 2. I never complained. I never felt lonely. He filled my entire world. I still remember the way he used to run to the door when he heard my key turning. He would throw his arms around my waist and say, "Mama, you're home." And I would laugh because that was the best greeting in the world. But things change. People grow. Life moves in ways we don't expect. I didn't know how much things would change until the day he brought home a young woman named Ria. Ria arrived in my life quietly, like a soft knock on a door I didn't know was open. Ariv met her at work. He told me she was kind, smart, and thoughtful. I smiled when he spoke about her, because the best happiness for a mother is seeing her child love and be loved. The first time I met her was on a warm afternoon at a small cafe near my home. I remember wiping my palms on my shawl nervously, wondering what kind of girl she would be. I wondered if she would like me. And I wondered if I would like her too. When she walked in, she was soft-spoken, polite, and a little shy. She smiled at me, and for a moment I felt relieved. "Auntie, I've heard so much about you," she said gently. I liked her then. I liked her for making my son happy. I liked her for the way she listened when Ariv spoke, her eyes soft, her fingers nervously playing with her cup. I didn't know that first impressions can be true. And still incomplete. A few months later, Ariv told me he wanted to marry her. I still remember the excitement in his voice. "Mama, she's the one," he said, almost like a whisper. And I hugged him. I hugged him tightly because every mother dreams of that moment, the day her child chooses a partner, a companion, a future. I was happy for him. Truly happy. The wedding was simple and beautiful. I helped with everything I could. Ria looked lovely in her soft-colored dress, and Ariv kept holding her hand as if he was afraid to let go. People said our little family looked wholesome. a mother, her son, and the daughter-in-law she welcomed with open arms. And I believed it too. At least for a while. The changes were slow at first. So slow that I didn't even recognize them as changes. Rhea was polite, yes. But she was also distant with me, like someone standing in the doorway but never stepping fully inside. She never raised her voice. She never insulted me. She never said anything openly hurtful. But there were small moments, tiny seeds planted quietly, that I ignored because I thought they didn't matter. Like the way she would tighten her smile when I gave Ariv homemade food. Or how she looked slightly uncomfortable when he hugged me in front of her. Or the way conversations between us were always careful. Still, I told myself, she just needs time. She's adjusting. Marriage is new for her too. A mother's heart is quick to forgive. And even quicker to explain away the things she doesn't want to see. After they got married, Ariv visited less often, but he always had explanations. Work is busy, Mama. We're sorting things out at the house. We'll come next week, I promise. And I believed him because I trusted him. I raised him with love. I raised him to respect family. So I assumed it was just life happening around us. But inside I felt a small pinch. Like a thread being pulled slowly, quietly. I thought it was just distance. I didn't know it was the beginning of separation. One day, I offered to help them set up their new home. I said, I can come over and help arrange the kitchen. You both must be tired. Rhea paused for a moment. Her smile was polite but tense. She glanced at Ariv before answering. That's very sweet of you, Auntie. But everything is already organized. He nodded. Course. Maybe they truly didn't need help. Maybe I was trying too hard. But when I went to their house later that month, invited for dinner, I noticed something. The kitchen didn't look organized at all. Many boxes were still left unopened. Some cupboards were empty. Ariv looked embarrassed when he saw me noticing the mess. But before he could say anything, Rhea quickly said, We're managing fine. We'll finish it soon. There was a tone I couldn't understand then. Now I do. There were other small things. Once, Ariv mentioned he missed my cooking. Just casually, like any son would. He said he loved my dal and rice, especially with the fried onions on top. Rhea smiled, but something in her eyes tightened. You can learn to make it, she said lightly. It's not that hard. The words weren't sharp. But they had an edge, thin as a thread but strong enough to pull something inside me. I didn't think she meant to hurt me. But the feeling stayed. Mothers don't want to take their sons away from their wives. Mothers only want to remain part of their children's world, even if the space becomes smaller with time. I didn't ask Ariv about it. I didn't tell him how I felt. Because mothers don't want to burden their children with their own loneliness. We simply smile. And carry the silence ourselves. Months passed. Seasons changed. Life kept moving. And slowly my son, my only child, began slipping away from me. Not in one dramatic moment. Not in one painful argument. But in hundreds of small ways. Cancelled visit here. Forgotten call there. A birthday text instead of a surprise visit. Sorry Mama, maybe next week. I accepted each one quietly. Because when you love someone, you learn to accept even the pain they give you. But the day that truly changed everything didn't come suddenly. It arrived like a shadow that had been following me for months. A shadow I refused to turn around and look at. It was the day I went to their house unannounced, carrying food for them. It was the day I stood on their doorstep with hope. It was the day the door closed behind me. And that was only the beginning. The day I went unannounced, I wasn't planning anything special. It wasn't a holiday. It wasn't a birthday. It wasn't even a weekend. It was just an ordinary afternoon. One of those days when the house feels too quiet, and your own heartbeat sounds louder than usual. I had woken up early and cooked Ariv's favorite dishes. Simple things: dal, rice, a small pot of chicken curry, and a box of sweet semolina halwa. It wasn't meant to be a surprise. It was meant to be love, shaped in the form of food. I packed everything neatly and took the bus to their neighborhood. There is a long street lined with little houses, each one with a different color door. I walked down that street slowly, feeling a little excited, a little nervous. The way mothers feel when they're about to see their children after a long time. I reached their home and knocked gently. I expected Ariv to open the door. Or maybe Rhea, with her usual polite smile. But instead there was silence. I knocked again, a little louder this time. After a moment, I heard footsteps approaching. The door opened a few inches and Rhea stood there, her expression calm but unreadable. "Oh, Auntie," she said, as if she wasn't expecting anyone at all. I lifted the bag of food slightly. "I brought lunch for you both. I thought I'd stop by." She didn't smile. Not fully. Her eyes shifted from the bag to my face. Then she said softly, "You should have called first." Her words weren't loud. They weren't rude. But they carried a message deeper than the surface. A message that said I wasn't welcome unless invited. Inside the house, I heard Ariv's voice faintly. He wasn't coming to the door. I waited for him to appear to say something to tell her it was okay. But he didn't. Rhea stepped out slightly, closing the door behind her so I couldn't see inside. "Auntie, it's just not a good time," she said gently. I felt something press against my chest, a dull, slow ache. "Oh," I whispered. "I didn't mean to disturb anything. I only brought food." She nodded, still guarded. "I know. But you can't come without calling. It puts us in a difficult place." A difficult place. My presence. My visit. My food. I wanted to ask. But when a mother feels unwanted, her voice disappears first. So I simply nodded. "It's okay," I said quietly. "I'll go." She hesitated, then reached for the bag in my hands. "No," I said softly, drawing it back. "It's all right. You two enjoy your day." Then I turned around and walked down the steps. The door closed behind me. Soft sound. But it felt like a wall being built, one I didn't know how to climb. As I walked back toward the bus stop, I kept telling myself not to cry. "It's nothing," I muttered inside. She didn't mean it. She was probably busy. Maybe they were resting. But my heart didn't believe the excuses my mind created. There are moments in life when a truth begins to knock. Not loudly. Just gently, like rain tapping on a window. That day, the truth knocked on my heart for the first time. And I ignored it. 3 days passed before Ariv called me. It was a short call. "Mama, you came by?" he asked, sounding half guilty and half distracted. "Yes," I said. "I brought food." Was. Long one. "Mama, you shouldn't come without calling. Rhea feels uncomfortable when things are unplanned." Uncomfortable. With me. I felt my throat tighten. But I kept my voice steady. "I only wanted to see you both," I said softly. "I know, Mama. But please understand. She likes structure. She likes order." "I see," I murmured. Another pause. Don't take it personally, okay?" Those words stayed with me long after the call ended. Don't take it personally. As if mothers can separate love from pain. As if the heart has an off button. After that, I tried to visit less. Called before going. Sometimes they said yes. Sometimes they said they were busy. Sometimes they didn't pick up at all. Little by little, my world grew smaller. I filled my days with small routines. Watering plants, watching old dramas on television, knitting scarves no one asked for. But nothing filled the emptiness that used to be filled by Ariv's presence. Then came the moment that should have warned me everything was about to change. It was a Sunday afternoon. Ariv called me, sounding tired. "Mama," he said, "Rhea feels like there's too much pressure from you. She thinks you expect us to visit too often." I felt a sharp sting inside. "Pressure?" I asked quietly. "I only ask to see you both sometimes." "I know, Mama. But she feels like it's too much for her. She's adjusting, you know." Adjusting. That word again. It had become a small knife wrapped in politeness. Before I could reply, he said, "Maybe give her some space. Just for a while." Closed my eyes. "All right," I whispered. He sighed with relief. And that told me everything I wasn't ready to face. My son felt safer easing her discomfort than protecting my heart. That was the first time I felt truly afraid. Afraid that I was losing him. Afraid that I was becoming a guest in the life I had built for him. Afraid that love might not be enough this time. Afraid that the distance between us was no longer temporary, but intentional. And I didn't know then that the worst was yet to come. The weeks after that phone call were some of the quietest days of my life. Silence filled my home like a guest who had moved in without asking. I made breakfast for one. I folded laundry for one. And every night I checked my phone, hoping to see Ariv's name on the screen. Some nights he called. Some nights he didn't. But slowly, even the short conversations turned into something that didn't feel like us anymore. He sounded distant, distracted, and careful, as if he was choosing every word with fear of upsetting someone beside him. That someone was not me. One morning, after 3 days without hearing from him, I decided to send a simple message. Good morning, Beta. I hope you and Ria are well. I waited an hour, then 2. Then the entire day. No reply. Late at night, around almost 11 p.m., his text finally came. We're fine, Mama. Busy day. Just that. Nothing more. I stared at the short message for a long time. It didn't feel like my Ariv. It felt like someone responding out of obligation, not love. And yet, I told myself to understand. Mothers always understand, even when understanding hurts. A few days later, an unexpected moment made everything clearer. I was buying vegetables at the local market when I overheard 2 women talking about their sons. One of them said, after marriage, boys change. Their wives become their first priority. The other replied, yes, but a good wife keeps the mother close too. She doesn't separate them. I stood there pretending to look at tomatoes, but inside my chest something shifted. A small tremor of realization. Was Ria trying to separate us? Or was Ariv choosing that distance on his own? The question bothered me for days. Not because I wanted someone to blame, but because I needed to understand where my place was now. One evening, I gathered the courage to ask Ariv gently. He had called me after many days, his voice tired. Are you all right? I asked. Just stressed, he replied. Things at home are complicated. I hesitated. Then I asked quietly. Complicated because of me? Silence. A long silence. Mama, he finally said. It's not your fault. But Ria feels like you judge her. She thinks she can never do things the way you want. I was stunned. I have never judged her, I said softly. Not once. I know, he replied. But she feels that way. Feelings. Perceptions. Shadows of things that never happened. Sometimes misunderstandings don't need words. They grow from silence, from guesswork, from someone choosing to believe the worst without checking the truth. I tried to breathe through the pain. What should I do then? I asked. Give her space, Mama. Please. There was the same request again. I felt like the world kept pushing me further and further away, asking me to shrink until I barely existed. Around this time, something else began happening. Whenever I called Ariv, it was Ria who answered. Her voice was always calm, polite, controlled. Ariv is in the shower. Ariv stepped out. Ariv is working. Ariv is tired. It became harder to reach him directly. I often wondered whether he knew I had called at all. She began speaking for him, deciding for him, shielding him from me, as if I was a problem to be managed, and not his mother. One evening something unusual happened. Ria called me from Ariv's phone. Auntie, she said in a soft voice. I hope you're well. Yes, Beta, I replied, surprised. Is Ariv all right? Yes, he's fine, she said. But her tone felt unusually controlled, almost rehearsed. We've been thinking, she continued. It might be better if you call only once or twice a week. Ariv has a lot on his mind, and too many calls can overwhelm him. Overwhelm him. My calls. I felt my fingers tremble. But my voice remained steady. "I understand," I whispered. I didn't argue. I didn't question her. I didn't defend myself. Maybe I should have. But when someone is slowly pushed out, they often don't realize it until the door has almost closed. The distance grew wider. Wider than I dared to admit. Arif stopped coming over completely. Birthdays were video calls instead of visits. Festivals were marked by short texts instead of shared meals. Even small celebrations became, "Next year, Mama." I spent many nights staring at the empty chair opposite mine. The chair he used to sit in while telling me stories from college, work and life. Now that chair stayed empty. Silent. Waiting. Just like I was. But the real turning point wasn't one moment. It was a collection of small incidents, like tiny cracks forming in a wall until one day the entire structure breaks. There was the time I heard Arif whispering while talking to me, as if he didn't want someone to hear him. There was the time Ria stood behind him during a video call, watching him with an expression I couldn't read. There was the time he rushed off the phone because Ria needed him right now. There was the time he forgot my birthday until late evening, then apologized as if he was reading from a script. There was the time I visited after calling ahead, and they weren't home. And the time they stopped calling me altogether unless there was an obligation attached, like a holiday or a family announcement. The world around me continued as normal. People came and went. Neighbors chatted. Children played outside. Life didn't pause for my heartbreak. But inside me something was changing. I felt like I was standing on one side of a bridge that used to connect us, a bridge that was now slowly collapsing plank by plank. And each time I tried to step forward, someone pulled the bridge a little farther away. One night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I whispered to myself, "When did loving my child become a burden?" Question stayed with me, haunting me, following me into the next day and the next. But nothing prepared me, not the distance, not the silence, not the polite rejection, for what would happen next. It was the moment everything finally broke. The moment I still carry in my heart, heavy as a stone. The moment that changed my relationship with my son forever. It was a rainy evening when I first realized how far I had been pushed away. The kind of rain that softens the streets and fills the air with that wet, heavy smell. I remember standing by my window, watching the drops slide down the glass. The world outside seemed alive, moving, connected. Inside I felt completely alone. I had called Arif that afternoon. I tried to speak softly, lightly, as if trying not to disturb the tension that had grown between us. But Ria answered. "Yes, this is Arif," she said, though Arif wasn't even in the room. Her voice was polite, controlled. Every word carefully measured, leaving no room for warmth. "Mama," I said, my voice soft. I just wanted to hear his voice. "You can call later," she said gently, almost too gently. "Right now he's busy." And just like that, the line went silent. I sat there, the phone trembling slightly in my hand. I realized, painfully, that I couldn't reach him without passing through her first. I couldn't speak to my own son without her filter. And with that, a seed of doubt began to grow in my chest, a cold, heavy seed. Has my daughter-in-law turned him against me? The days following that call were like walking through fog. I moved through my home, my routines, my little errands. And yet, everything felt uncertain. Every memory of Arif, every thought of our life together, now carried a shadow. Neighbors noticed I was quieter than usual. The shopkeeper asked if I was unwell. Even the cat seemed to sense my melancholy. But what could I say? That my son's wife had begun to build walls around him. And I was standing outside, helpless? Then, one afternoon everything escalated. I had stopped by their house with flowers. Just flowers. Not unannounced food, not gifts, nothing heavy. Just a small bouquet of jasmine, his favorite scent. I knocked softly. The door opened a crack, and Ria appeared. "Oh, Auntie, what a surprise," she said, her smile polite, almost rehearsed. "I thought you might like these," I said, holding out the flowers. Her hand hovered above them for a moment. Then she stepped back, blocking the doorway slightly. We're busy, she said. I'm sorry, but you shouldn't come over like this. It makes things complicated. I felt my chest tighten. My voice caught. But I said nothing. I simply nodded and turned to leave. As I walked down the steps, I heard her softly add, "Please, don't come without calling." And that's when I realized, it wasn't just about boundaries. It wasn't about convenience. It was about control. And Ariv, my own son, stood silently beside her, saying nothing. Not one word to defend me. Not one word to protect me. Not one word to remind both of them that I was his mother. I froze on the sidewalk. A million thoughts collided in my head. A million emotions rose and fell. And then I did the only thing I could think of. Smiled. I smiled because if I cried now, if I argued, if I shouted, I would have lost more than dignity. I would have lost the quiet love I still carried for my son. So I smiled. I turned and walked away. That night, I sat in my small apartment, the flowers on the table, their scent faint, like a memory I could almost touch but not hold. I whispered to myself, I can't force him to love me. I can't force her to accept me. All I can do is wait. Wait for truth to show itself. Wait for hearts to see what's real. And I realized as I held the jasmine, that love alone was not enough. Not when people choose to let fear, pride, and misunderstanding take the place of care. That evening was the beginning of the most painful chapter of my life. The chapter where I learned what it meant to be pushed aside quietly, gently, but completely. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I held on to hope. Hope that maybe one day my son would see clearly again. That the bond we shared, the bond we had built over decades, could survive this quiet storm. It happened on a quiet Thursday afternoon. The kind of day when the sky is pale, almost gray, and the sunlight feels soft but distant. I had called Ariv earlier, trying to hear his voice like I always did. No answer. Ria picked up instead. "Mama," she said gently. "He's at work. Can I help you with something?" I hesitated, then whispered, "I just want to talk to him. It's important." "There's nothing important now," she said calmly. "Maybe another time. He's busy." I felt my chest tighten. Her voice, so calm, so polite, carried a weight I had not expected. A weight of finality. I tried again. I asked if he could call me later. She said nothing. Just a soft click. And the line went dead. It was in that silence, heavy and absolute, that I realized I was no longer reaching him. Not fully. Not truly. Later that evening, I went to the market to clear my thoughts. I needed to breathe. I needed the air. And then I saw it. A small envelope lying on the steps of the apartment block. Not addressed to me, not hidden, just lying there as if someone had dropped it. Picked it up. Inside was a letter. Not meant for me, surely, but I opened it. Mothers always notice things others don't want them to. And there it was. Words that cut deeper than anything Ria had ever said aloud. "Mama is too involved. She interferes. She must leave. I can't handle her presence anymore. Ariv agrees." My hands trembled as I read the words. My chest felt heavy. The letter was small, polite, typed neatly, but the betrayal inside it was enormous. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. My son, my Ariv, my own child had agreed. With her. Without me. Push me out. And that moment, standing there on the market steps with rain beginning to fall softly around me, was the moment I truly felt the heartbreak of a mother betrayed. I went home slowly, my fingers gripping the envelope like it was a lifeline. I sat by the window, listening to the rain, trying to understand what had happened. How had it come to this? How had a relationship that took decades to build been quietly erased in months? How had my own son, my only son, allowed someone else to decide how he felt about his mother? I couldn't shout. I couldn't cry. I could only breathe slowly, letting the storm outside match the storm inside me. And then the memory came back. All the little moments I had ignored, all the polite boundaries, all the soft ways Rhea had begun to shape his decisions. Every call she answered, every visit she delayed, every gentle, polite rejection. It had been building, quietly, relentlessly, until the day I held the letter in my hands, and my son's silence confirmed it all. That night, I sat alone at my small dining table, the envelope unopened now, folded neatly beside me. I touched it gently with one finger, as if by doing so I could undo the betrayal. I whispered to myself, "Ariv, my son, why didn't you speak? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" And in that quiet, I realized something else. This wasn't just about me being pushed out. This was about trust, about love, about the bond between a mother and her child. I understood in that moment that the hardest part wasn't losing my home or my presence in their lives. It was losing the sense that my love mattered enough to be defended. And yet, even in that heartbreak, even in that betrayal, I still loved him. Because mothers love beyond logic, beyond fairness, beyond hurt. A few days later, I gathered the courage to visit their house one last time. I called ahead, but inside, I already knew it wouldn't matter. I needed to see it with my own eyes. To hear it. To feel it. When I arrived, the door opened before I could knock. Rhea stood there, her arms folded politely. And Ariv was behind her, hesitant, quiet, avoiding my gaze. I took a deep breath. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and soft. I wanted to see you both," I said slowly. "My son. I need to speak to you." Rhea's eyes flicked toward Ariv, sharp and calculating, as if warning him. But he didn't speak. He just stood there. I tried again, my voice shaking slightly. "I don't understand why I'm being pushed away." Why both of you?" Rhea interrupted softly. "Mama, it's better this way." Ariv agrees. "We need space. You have to understand that." I looked at Ariv then, finally. He avoided my eyes. A small tremble in his jaw. A hesitation that said more than words ever could. "Ariv, my son, is this true?" I asked quietly, almost a whisper. He swallowed. He shook his head slightly. Then looked down. "Yes, Mama." "I thought it was easier," he admitted. "I didn't want to upset her. I didn't know how to handle it. I felt my heart break in pieces I hadn't known existed." He had chosen someone else's comfort over his mother's love. I raised you with love, Ariv," I said softly. "I never asked for much. I only wanted to be part of your life. To see you happy. Is that too much?" He said nothing. Rhea stepped forward, her voice polite but firm. "Mama, it's nothing personal. We just need our own space." And just like that, the final line was drawn. A line that separated us in a way words could not repair. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Smiled. Because if I lost my calm, if I lost my dignity, I would have lost the only thing left to me. My love still intact even if unreturned. I turned slowly, holding my head high, and walked away from the house that had once been my son's world, and that now belonged to someone else entirely. That night, sitting alone, I replayed the conversation over and over in my mind. I tried to make sense of it, tried to find fault in myself, in him, in her, anywhere. But there was nothing to fix. The bridge had already collapsed, and no amount of wishing could rebuild it. Yet even in that heartbreak, I found a strange clarity. I realized, love isn't about control. Love isn't about being in the same room. Love isn't about being chosen over someone else. Love is enduring. Even when it's ignored. Even when it's not returned. Even when it hurts more than you can bear. And I still loved him. I still loved my son. Even if he no longer remembered what that love had felt like. The letter, the silences, the gentle rejections. All of it became a lesson I had to carry. I couldn't force him. I couldn't force her. I couldn't force my place back in his life. All I could do was accept. All I could do was let go. All I could do was hope. Hope that one day he might see the truth, and that my love, patient and unwavering, would not be forgotten. And as I placed my hand over my chest, I whispered into the quiet night. Mama will always love you, Arif. Even when you cannot see it. Even when someone else tries to take me away. Even if it hurts beyond words. And in that quiet, I felt a weight lift slightly from my shoulders. Not the weight of betrayal, but the weight of understanding. I could not change what had happened, but I could carry my love with dignity. Could survive it. I could endure it. 'Cause that is what mothers do. The days after that confrontation were quieter than any I had experienced in years. I returned to my small apartment, the walls filled with memories of a life I had once shared with Arif. Memories of birthdays, school projects, small breakfasts, late-night talks, and laughter that used to fill the rooms. I walked through each day slowly, letting myself remember without anger. I let myself feel the loss without trying to fill it with blame. I tried, as mothers often do, to find calm inside the storm. I began to focus on myself. Small things I had neglected for years. I tended my plants with care, each leaf a little reminder that life goes on. I cooked meals for myself, savoring the flavors I had once prepared for him. I watched the rain, the sunsets, the little clouds drifting lazily across the sky. And sometimes I whispered his name softly, letting the love flow without expectation. Some nights, loneliness pressed hard against my chest. I would sit by the window, listening to the distant sounds of laughter from other families. Sometimes I imagined Arif there, smiling and happy, but without me. The ache was sharp. It was real. And yet, in that same silence, I found something remarkable. The realization that my love for him was not tied to recognition or gratitude. It existed simply because it existed. It was not diminished by rejection. It was not erased by betrayal. It was constant. And in that constancy, I began to find peace. I also began to write again, something I had stopped doing when life became all about Arif. Letters I never sent, stories I never shared, reflections of my heart and my memories. Some of them were about him, yes, but they were also about me. About resilience, about understanding, about the quiet courage a mother carries. Occasionally, I would write to him anyway. Letters I never mailed. I poured my feelings onto the page. Every regret, every longing, every piece of love I still held for him. It was a way to honor our bond, even if the world had shifted around it. Months passed. And slowly, the sharp edge of the pain began to soften. I stopped waiting for calls. I stopped planning visits that might never come. I stopped holding my breath every time the phone rang. Instead, I focused on the things I could control. My home, my routines, my little joys. I spoke to friends more often. I smiled at neighbors. I found small happinesses where I could. In a cup of tea, a flower blooming on the balcony, the quiet rhythm of life around me. And yet I never stopped loving Arif. Never stopped hoping that one day he would see clearly again. One day he might realize the choices made on politeness or fear had created distance between us. And perhaps one day he might come back, not because he owed me, but because the love we shared as mother and son was too deep to remain forgotten. I had learned that love can exist even when it is unseen. That bonds can endure even when walls are built around them. That mothers, above all, carry patience like a shield, and hope like a quiet flame that never goes out. Years may have passed since that rainy afternoon, but I still carry Arif in my heart, exactly as he was when he was my little boy running to greet me at the door. I carry the memories of laughter, of bedtime stories, of soft hugs, of small hands in mine. I've learned that love is not measured by proximity or permission. It is not proven by visits or phone calls or polite words. Love is measured by the constancy of the heart, by the quiet choices we make to keep it alive, even when the world does not acknowledge it. I have forgiven, though forgiveness is not a single act. It is a process, a soft letting go of anger and resentment. I have forgiven Arif for not defending me, and I have forgiven Ria for building the walls between us, not because they deserved it, but because I deserve peace. I have also learned that a mother's heart is vast and unending, can hold hurt and hope in the same breath. It can survive betrayal, misunderstanding, and silence, and still shine with love for the children who may one day return, or may not. Sometimes I still imagine Arif walking back to my doorstep. I imagine his voice calling softly, apologetic, regretful, and full of love. But even if that day never comes, I know that the bond we shared will never truly disappear. It exists in the lessons I've learned, in the patience I've cultivated, in the quiet strength that comes from loving without expectation. And so I move forward, slowly, gently, with care, focusing on small joys, cherishing memories, loving without needing to be loved in return. Because life teaches us that love is not always returned the way we hope. Sometimes it is tested. Sometimes it is hidden behind walls built by others. Sometimes it requires silence and distance. But the truth remains. Love is never wasted. Love is never lost. And as I close my eyes at night, feeling the gentle rhythm of life around me, I whisper quietly to my own heart, Mama will always love you, Arif. No matter the distance, no matter the silence, no matter the walls. And in that love, I find peace.